My name is Nina, I'm 32, and I don't really know who I am anymore. I've rehearsed this a dozen different ways in my head, how to explain, how to justify, how to make it sound like I wasn't just some selfish woman who messed up a good thing. But the truth is never that clean, is it? It started with safety. That warm, buzzing kind of comfort you get when you're with someone who knows how you take your coffee and what song you secretly cry to. I had that with Jonah. God, did I love him. We were the kind of couple that made other people roll their eyes, finishing each other's sentences, grabbing each other's hands in elevators, whispering inside jokes over drinks at noisy bars. Our apartment was tiny but full of light and life. Sunday mornings were for tangled limbs and music playing too low. We made pancakes, burned half of them, and laughed. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And then, slowly, like watching colors fade from an old photo, it started to feel muted. Jonah still kissed me goodbye every morning, but it was like a reflex. His lips were warm, but his eyes didn't linger. He still pulled me close in bed, but sometimes I felt more like a pillow than a partner. He'd stroke my hair absently, but there was no intention in his touch anymore, no spark behind the affection. I blamed myself first. Maybe I was working too much. Maybe I wasn't present enough. I tried harder, planned date nights, bought lingerie, left him notes tucked into his briefcase. And he responded in that polite, distracted way you'd expect from someone being handed a coffee order they didn't ask for. He said, "Thank you." He said, "You're sweet." He said, "You didn't have to do this." But he didn't say, "I miss you." One night, a few months ago, I curled up beside him after dinner. We'd just watched a movie. I leaned my head on his chest like I used to, hoping no, begging for that old electric hum to return. He wrapped his arm around me, but it felt loose, like a gesture copied from a memory rather than one born in the moment. When I kissed his jaw, he smiled, but didn't kiss me back. That's when I felt it. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just this dull ache in my chest. Like something important was being misplaced, and I had no idea how to find it again. I think that was the first time I realized I was lonely inside our relationship. That ache followed me around like a shadow. At work, on walks, even while grocery shopping. And then someone else noticed me. I didn't go looking for it. I swear I didn't. It started with conversation. Just words. Laughter. Eye contact. The kind of undivided attention I hadn't felt in months. He listened to me. He leaned in when I spoke. He looked at me like I was something whole. I wish I could say I stopped it there, that I remembered the promises I made. But I didn't. And when Jonah made me sit down and tell him everything, when he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I want to hear it from you," I broke. I told him the truth. Every messy, ugly, selfish part of it. I braced for yelling. For hurt. For him walking out. But instead, he just sat back in the chair, nodded slowly, and said, "Cool. I've been sleeping with someone too." And in that moment, I realized whatever we'd had, it was already gone. Jonah's a paramedic. 12-hour shifts, emergency calls at 3 a.m., adrenaline-fueled rescues that leave him dead-eyed and drained by the time he walks through our door. I used to admire it, how selfless he was, how calm under pressure. He'd come home with blood on his boots and collapse on the couch, eyes barely open. I'd kiss his forehead, take his bag, and whisper, "You did good today." He always smiled, even half asleep. But somewhere in the routine of saving strangers, he stopped seeing me. I remember one night, a few weeks after he missed our anniversary dinner. He'd gotten called in again. I sat alone at that overpriced restaurant, our wine glasses untouched, the waiter awkwardly asking if I wanted to just box everything up. I said no. I went home. I didn't cry. I just crawled into bed in the dress I bought for him, feeling like an afterthought. When he finally came home the next morning, exhausted and apologetic, he tried to fix it the only way he knew how, his hands. Not cruel or forceful, but hungry. Like if he just touched me enough, it would erase the distance growing between us. He kissed my neck. I turned my face. "Babe, come on," he murmured, voice low, fingertips grazing my waist. But my chest tightened. I didn't want his hands. I wanted his attention. His presence. I wanted him to ask how I felt waiting alone in a dress I bought to impress him. I wanted to tell him that I felt humiliated, forgotten, that I didn't want to be touched, I wanted to be heard. But instead, I froze. "I'm just tired," I whispered and rolled away. I saw his jaw tense in the dim light. He pulled his hand back like I'd slapped him. We didn't talk about it. Not then. Not the next day. Instead, he brought me flowers after his next shift. Sunflowers, my favorite. He smiled like that was the fix. "See? I remember things," he said, placing them on the table with pride. I smiled back. "Thank you," I said, because it felt easier than explaining that remembering my favorite flower wasn't the same as remembering me. One night, during dinner, I tried to bring it up gently. "I feel like we're not connecting lately," I said, watching him push food around on his plate. He looked up surprised. "Is this about sex?" "No, not really," I said, but he was already shaking his head. "We've both been tired, Nina. Work is insane. You know that. It'll pass." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand, and I didn't pull away, but I didn't squeeze back either. What I meant was, I feel lonely. I miss how you used to look at me. I miss us. What he heard was, "I want you to touch me more." So he did. He touched me more. Quick kisses in the hallway, hands sliding under my shirt while I loaded the dishwasher, a grip on my waist as I walked past him. But it felt performative, like he was checking boxes instead of reaching for me. The more he touched me without asking how I was, the more I withdrew. He thought I was shutting down. I thought he wasn't trying hard enough. Neither of us said the truth, that we were trying, just not in the same language. And that's how the cracks deepened, not with shouting, but with silence. It was a Thursday night. Late. Jonah had come home earlier than usual, and I was already curled up on the couch with my laptop and a half-eaten tub of ice cream. The house was quiet except for the dull hum of the ceiling fan and some crime doc playing in the background. He dropped his bag by the door, kicked off his boots, and walked into the living room with that crooked smile I used to love. "Hey, stranger," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of my head. I stiffened before I could stop myself. He noticed. Of course he did. His lips hovered there for an extra beat, as if testing the space between us. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah. Just tired," I said, closing the laptop and setting it aside. He sat down beside me close. Too close. His arm draped over my shoulder, and he pulled me against him, like he was trying to mold my body into his. His hand started to drift under the blanket, resting on my thigh. I didn't move, but I didn't melt into him either. I just sat there, stiff and still, pretending I was comfortable. "You smell good," he murmured, nose brushing against my cheek. "Missed you." I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. It wasn't that I didn't want him. That was the worst part. There was still a part of me that remembered how good it used to be, when his hands felt like home, when our bodies knew how to talk even when our words didn't. But now, every touch felt heavy with expectation. Every kiss felt like a request I wasn't ready to answer. He slid his hand up my thigh a little further. I shifted my weight and pulled the blanket tighter around me. "Jonah," I said, soft but sharp enough to make him pause. He stopped, leaning back to look at me. "What?" "Nothing. Just, I don't know." He exhaled hard, frustrated. "It feels like I can't win with you lately. One minute you're smiling, the next you act like I'm a stranger." "I'm not acting like anything. I cut myself off, unsure what I was even trying to explain." He sat up straighter. "You've barely looked at me all week. You pull away every time I touch you. If something's wrong, just say it." "I don't know what's wrong." I snapped louder than I meant to. "I'm just overwhelmed." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, rubbing his hands together. "You say you want connection. I try to give it to you, and it's still not enough. Connection isn't the same thing as touching me every chance you get." He turned to me, his face tight. "What am I supposed to do then, Nina? Give you space and get accused of being distant? Or be close and get treated like I'm pressuring you?" I looked away, heat crawling up my neck. "I don't know," I whispered. "I really don't." He stood up, pacing now. "You used to like it when I grabbed your ass or pulled you in close. Now it's like I have to ask for permission just to kiss you." I flinched at that, not because he was wrong, but because he wasn't. He paused and looked down at me. Do you even want this anymore? I didn't answer. Because how do you explain the feeling of being loved wrong by someone who used to love you right? Later that night, when he came to bed and wrapped his arm around me, I didn't pull away, but I didn't sleep either. I just stared at the wall, feeling his breath on my neck and the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on my chest. And in the silence, the only thought repeating in my head was, why does everything have to turn into sex? It happened at a restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a cozy Italian place around the corner from our apartment. Jonah made the reservation, said he wanted to reconnect. He even wore the blue shirt I once told him made his eyes look insane. It felt like he was trying, and I wanted to try too. I put on lipstick, wore heels, tried to psych myself into the mood like it was a performance I could rehearse into perfection. We sat across from each other, candle flickering between us, the clink of cutlery and soft jazz filling the space. He reached across the table to hold my hand, thumb brushing against mine. I let him. It felt fine. Not exciting. Not terrible. Just fine. So, he said, his voice casual, I was thinking maybe we could take a weekend trip. Just us. Clear our heads. That sounds nice, I said, sipping my wine. My stomach was already tightening. Beach? Mountains? Somewhere quiet. He smiled, hopeful. I nodded, but my eyes dropped to the table. I couldn't bring myself to smile back. He must have felt the distance, because his brow furrowed. Are you even here with me, Nina? I'm trying, I said quickly. Too quickly. You always say that. Something about the way he said it, flat, tired, dismissive, triggered a rush of heat to my cheeks. A flicker of panic. Then the wine, the pressure, the quiet music, it all became too much. I am trying, Jonah. I snapped, louder than I meant to. A few heads turned. His eyes widened. Okay. I didn't mean no, you never mean, I interrupted, tears stinging before I could hold them back. You just throw your hands up and act confused when I'm falling apart right in front of you. He blinked. Where's this coming from? It's been coming for months. I said, my voice cracking. You touch me like I'm some checkbox on your to-do list. You sleep beside me like I'm not even real anymore. And when I try to talk about it, you make me feel crazy for wanting something deeper than just sex and flowers. He was stunned. Speechless. I wiped my eyes furiously, angry at the tears, at myself, at him. Do you know how long I've been screaming in my head for you to just see me? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The server arrived then, awkwardly placing our pasta dishes between us. The silence was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't stay. I have to go, I muttered, standing up too fast. My chair scraped against the floor, sharp and loud. Nina, Jonah said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back like his touch burned. Don't. I left the restaurant in a blur, heels clicking down the sidewalk, face flushed, vision blurred. When I finally made it home, I locked the door behind me and collapsed on the couch, sobbing. Not the pretty kind. The full-body kind, like grief, like guilt, like something inside me had finally cracked wide open. I hated the way I'd yelled at him. Hated the way his face fell, like I'd slapped him in front of strangers. But I also hated that it had come to this. That my voice had to reach a breaking pitch before he listened. Sitting there in the dark, mascara streaking down my cheeks, I thought about how everything had unraveled, how once, all it took was a smile from him to make me feel whole. And now, it took a meltdown just to feel noticed. Maybe I broke it. Maybe we both did. Maybe it had already been broken, and this was just the sound of it finally shattering. The silence settled in slowly, like fog rolling into a town that used to be bright. After the restaurant, Jonah barely spoke to me. He didn't slam doors or yell or accuse. He just shut down. The way someone does when they've learned how to survive disappointment. He'd leave for work before I was out of bed and come home after I'd already crawled under the covers. A quiet ghost moving through our shared space. At first, I told myself he needed time. That maybe the outburst was necessary, a clearing of the air, however messy. But days turned to a week. Then 2. And the distance between us stretched wider than our apartment could hold. I caught him once, standing in the kitchen, staring blankly at his coffee mug like he couldn't remember what it was for. His uniform was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved in days. When he noticed me watching, he gave me a nod, nothing more, and left without a word. It hurt more than if he'd screamed. There were moments I caught flashes of who he used to be. The way he reached for his keys with muscle memory. The way he still took out the trash like it mattered. The way his eyes softened when the neighbor's dog barked excitedly at him through the window. He wasn't a monster. He never was. He was tired, wounded, human. And I missed him. Not just the version I had loved at the beginning, but him, in all his flaws and silence and effort. I missed the way he'd rest his chin on my shoulder when I cooked. The way he'd hum when brushing his teeth. The way he once held me like I was something precious, not breakable. But now the air between us was sharp. Every room echoed with the things we weren't saying. We weren't fighting anymore. But we weren't loving either. And I hated it. I hated myself for what I'd done. For letting someone else in. For craving attention like it was oxygen and convincing myself it was harmless, just a spark to feel alive. I had lit a match in a house already full of gas, and now I was watching it burn down around us. One evening, I found Jonah sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. He didn't look up when I came in. "Do you want tea?" I asked. He paused. "No, I'm good." I nodded, turned to leave. "Nina," he said suddenly, his voice quiet. I stopped in the doorway. "Do you regret it?" he asked. I turned, unsure if he was talking about the fight, the silence, or the affair. "Yes," I said. "All of it." He nodded slowly and looked down at his hands. "Okay." He didn't ask for more. Didn't offer comfort. Just, "Okay." That night, I lay awake beside him, watching the shadows shift on the ceiling. I wanted to reach out and touch him. Tell him I was still in there somewhere, still wanting to fix this, still holding on. But the truth was I didn't know how to fix it. And maybe worse, I didn't know if he wanted to. I closed my eyes and asked myself the one question I'd been avoiding since everything started unraveling. Was I staying out of love, or just because I was afraid to leave? By morning, I still didn't have an answer. But I knew I'd have to choose soon. Before the silence between us became permanent. It happened 3 weeks after the fight. I was folding laundry on a Sunday evening, t-shirts, socks, the same navy scrubs Jonah always wore on night shifts. The apartment felt still, like it was holding its breath. He was sitting on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at nothing. I didn't expect the words when they came. I wasn't even sure he was talking to me at first. "I slept with her twice," he said, his voice flat. "Her name's Alina. She works ER triage." It wasn't serious. I froze, holding one of his shirts in my hands like it weighed 100 pounds. He turned his head slowly toward me. "I thought you should know." For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of my own breath. He hadn't said it out of revenge. There was no venom in his tone, just quiet honesty. Like he was offering me the last piece of a puzzle we both hated looking at. I sat down in the armchair across from him, the clean laundry forgotten in my lap. I figured, I whispered. He nodded. "I think part of me wanted you to say something first," he added. "Like, if you told me, I wouldn't have to feel as guilty about what I'd already done." There it was. The moment the title of our story snapped into focus. He made me confess, and then he said cool, because he'd already stepped out of the same door. Just first. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was exhausted. Like neither of us had the energy to be angry anymore. "I don't know what to do with us," I said quietly. "I still care about you. I miss you. But I don't know if we're fixable." He rubbed his hands together and let out a long breath. "I don't either." Then he stood, walked over, and knelt in front of me. His hands rested on my knees, warm but not desperate. He looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes that made him look years older. "I don't hate you," he said. "I'm not even sure I blame you anymore. We both broke this. We just did it at different speeds." Tears welled in my eyes. I placed my hands over his, and we sat like that for a long time, no words, just skin on skin. A kind of grieving. Eventually, he rested his head on my lap. I stroked his hair gently, like I used to when he came home drained from a rough shift. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even comforting. It was just quiet. Real. When he fell asleep there, I didn't move. Later that night, I tucked a blanket over him where he lay curled on the couch. He didn't stir. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. Not because things were fixed, but because the pretending was finally over. We didn't wake up the next day magically healed. We still slept in separate beds. We still moved around each other like glass. But now there was honesty. Awkward, painful, necessary honesty. We started small. Dinner together twice a week. No physical touch unless asked for. Therapy separate for now. We left a notebook on the kitchen counter to write things we couldn't say out loud. Some pages were angry. Some were sad. A few just said, "I miss you." We weren't rebuilding. Not yet. But maybe we weren't ending either. And in that fragile in-between, there was still something worth holding on to. You always think the worst thing is the betrayal. The confession. The moment the truth slips out of your mouth and you see someone flinch like they've just been stabbed, but they don't scream. They just go quiet. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is realizing how long it had been broken before either of you dared to say it out loud. I used to think love meant holding on no matter what. Fighting for it, even when you were bleeding. But now I think love, real love, is knowing when to stop performing it. When to stop handing over your body like an apology. When to stop shrinking yourself to keep the peace. What happened between Jonah and me wasn't a single event. It was erosion. The slow wearing down of connection, bit by bit, word by unspoken word. And I think we both contributed to that. I withdrew emotionally. He defaulted to touch. We both stopped listening. And someone else noticed me before he did. I don't say that to justify what I did. There's no clean way to explain an affair. No poetic spin to put on it that makes it anything other than what it is. A choice to look outside what you promised to protect. But I will say this, I was starving. For attention. For intimacy. For the version of myself that used to laugh louder, kiss slower, feel wanted. I didn't recognize myself in our relationship anymore. And I didn't feel recognized. Jonah wasn't the villain. Neither was I. We were two people with good intentions and bad communication, pretending everything was fine until the silence started screaming. When he said, "Cool, I've been sleeping with someone too," I didn't feel angry. I felt sad. Deeply, soulfully sad. Because that moment proved what I'd been afraid of for months. We had both already left. Our bodies just hadn't caught up. But here's the strange part, we didn't walk away. Not completely. We didn't burn the house down and call it freedom. We sat in the wreckage and asked if anything was worth rebuilding. And maybe it is. Or maybe it's not. I still don't know. We're not back together in the way people hope for when they hear stories like this. We're not posting cute selfies or making love like teenagers. But we're talking. Really talking. In a way we never did when we were pretending everything was perfect. Some nights, we sit on the balcony with mugs of tea and say hard things like, "I felt invisible," or "I didn't know how to reach you." And those words feel heavier than any "I love you" ever did. I've learned that desire doesn't always look like fire. Sometimes it's quiet. It's presence. It's asking someone how their heart is doing before you reach for their body. I've learned that emotional intimacy has to come before anything else. Otherwise, touch feels like pressure. Like performance. Like obligation wrapped in affection. And I've learned to stop begging someone to guess what I need. Say it. Out loud. Even if your voice shakes. So, if you're listening to this, hoping for answers, I'll give you what I have. If you feel like you're disappearing inside a relationship, stop waiting for someone else to notice. Speak. Even if it ruins the silence. Even if it costs you the comfort of pretending. Because the truth is, silence doesn't save love. Honesty does. Even if it breaks things first. E2.